Yep.
Oh, hey, we're live. We're live. The MMA Prospectus has returned. This is Zane Simon, joined once again by my esteemed cohort, Tom Grant. We are here to talk about UFC Boston and some lightweight prospects. It's going to be the main focus of our show today. But Boston's got enough guys on it that even that alone is enough to take up some serious time.
Yeah, no, it's a really really good card. And all three they're banking it on that time slot that Conor McGregor aced last year against that was the Seaver card, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was
Same,
the like
same, same Boston place, same Boston time, same Boston location.
exactly. Um, the by the way, the to go completely off on a tangent because that's the kind of day I'm having. The Twitter account that just sends out pictures of the original Batman series and just highlights like a word put on the equipment in it, like Bat Radar, is probably one of my favorite Twitter accounts.
That does sound like a quality time there.
I
Yeah,
enjoyed derailing the show.
certainly very very off topic. I don't really know where to carry that anywhere. I don't have anywhere to go with like the Twitter account that makes Batman tweets of bat objects.
Yeah,
I guess the draw would be me saying same Boston time. That
yeah.
that,
I've
that
ended the show. That's it. MMA Prospectus is over forever now.
all right. But yes, it has been exactly 1 year since their last Boston card. Um, which yeah, I can't say I think that the success of that card really had a lot to do with it being in Boston or on this day.
Well, it's part of it is that it's a they get to promote it through the two NFL playoff games this
Yeah, that's
weekend.
true.
They'll lead right into it, and I think they want to see if it was the McGregor factor or is the time slot valuable too. And they put a hell of a fight on it. I mean, they put a hell of a card on
It's true. I mean, I think we know now that it was the McGregor factor, but it'll be interesting to see how much bump this gets through that same time slot. The Dillashaw Cruz fight, it could be interesting, but I mean, it'll be fun. I'm glad to watch it. It'll be interesting, but there's a lot of rose-colored glasses being worn by bandwagoning Dominic Cruz fans who forget that he was largely considered one of the most unwatchable champions during his reign.
Yeah, it's funny how the narrative around Dominic Cruz has really shifted because yeah, I was very much in the reads as an MMA fan already when Cruz came up, and he was despised as a champion by some fans. Um, just really and wasn't and it's one of those things I don't he was not a bad champion. He's not was not nearly as dominant as he's being remembered as. Um,
Yeah,
he
I mean, I
never like
loved watching him fight. I really
yeah,
did.
yeah, he was a must watch fight because his fights were always interesting and competitive and fun, at least like for the
To,
most
to
part. They were very different for the time period. But like he didn't run over Uriah Faber at UFC 132. He didn't
no,
run over Joseph Benavidez at WEC 50. Like I think a lot of people were thinking that like the guy. I think especially a lot of fans who really didn't know him that well have watched the highlights and then saw what he did to Kei Sagaki and are like, oh my god, this guy's a killer.
yeah.
When he was ahead of the game for his time, but the stuff he was doing is kind of some parts of it are become kind of standard practice now.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just funny that it's sort of like the love that Frankie Edgar kind of gets out of his hardcore fans these
Yeah,
days, where it's like, God, where were you people when he was champion? Because nobody cared.
yeah. The hardcore Frankie fans and like there weren't that many Dom Cruz fans.
No.
Um, I mean, there were people that liked him. It was more about of the if you didn't like Team Alpha Male, you liked watching Dominic Cruz beat the Team Alpha Male guys. But like,
Yep.
there was nobody. There weren't that many people being like when Dominic Cruz fought Scott Jorgens, and they'd be like, "Man, you gotta watch WEC 53 for Dominic Cruz. It's gonna be insane."
Yeah.
It
No.
was it
He.
was all Pettis Henderson. Who,
Yeah.
hey, now Dominic Cruz is headlining the card Anthony Pettis is his co-main event.
It's true. It's true. It's still going to be a fun fight. I
Oh,
look forward to watching it, but it'll be interesting to see if it's the kind of fight that fans end up being really disinterested in. Like if it's going to be the basic version of two fighters working a Mighty Mouse like style, where for 5 rounds fans are just like, okay, you know what? I saw the first round and a half of this. I don't need to see any more.
I think it's going to be fun just because TJ Dillashaw uses a lot of stance switching and shifting
Yeah.
steps to like close distance in the way that Dominic Cruz used a lot of shifting steps to create angles. I think philosophically they're very different fighters.
Yeah,
TJ Dillashaw is in there to kill you. Dominic Cruz is very much like the main goal of his striking is to not get hit and set up his wrestling.
Yep.
Whereas TJ Dillashaw's main goal of his footwork and moving is to hit you really hard several times until you fall down.
Yeah, it's going to be a good fight. I mean, I'm going to enjoy watching it no matter what. It's just interesting because, like, as you say, it's that, can they recapture lightning in a bottle on this Boston card? And it's a good card. It's got some fun fights at the top, but I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
we know what we know what the major driver of that last Boston card was in hindsight.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that we were at a point where people didn't want to admit how big of a deal Conor McGregor was, and now most fans have kind of been forced to accept that like he is in fact that big of a deal in terms of just fan interest. Like let's not even talk about the fact that he's champion and knocked out Jose Aldo and all that, but like just fan interest in him. People, we're at the point where people are like, "There's no way people are going to watch him fight Dennis Siver."
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We've come a long way in a year.
So, still, that's not why we're here. That's not what we're doing. We're here to talk prospects, and this card's got a bunch of them. First and foremost, probably, if we're looking at just the whole card top to bottom right now, and who's got the most shine coming into this as a young fighter, it's got to be Luke Sanders.
Yep. He was one of our Bloody Elbow scouting report top 10 guys for bantamweight, or was it
on the unreleased bantamweight list that we talked our way through?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, he was one of our top bantamweight guys fighting out of the MMA lab, and has a very similar style to like MMA lab fighters. Very Ben Henderson, like high motor, high pace sort of fight. Likes to fight in the clinch. Is a good wrestler and a pretty good grappler, and has really interesting ways of striking at times, but very effective at it. I think he's like
a B everywhere, and then he's like an A+ athlete or like an A level athlete with just unending cardio.
Yeah, he just keeps coming at you. Really, really fun athlete. So I'm excited to see him get in there. He's a guy that I've been kind of keeping an eye on since we did that list, and he only got one fight in this year so far, or only one fight in last year. So I think he might have been holding out for this.
Could be. I can't remember. When I looked over his record, I would definitely not be surprised if after his May fight early last year, if he was just waiting out his contract with RFA
and hoping for something.
Well, just waiting out so that he'd be free, and then the moment the opportunity came, take the call up.
Yeah.
Especially coming out of the MMA lab. I mean, a guy like that is going to be on a short list.
Yeah. They can't. I don't put the MMA lab amongst like the top elite camps of like an ATT or like a Kings or an AKA, but it's definitely one of the bigger, better camps out there.
Well, and I mean, Joe Silva and Sean Shelby, as much scouting as they do, and I'm sure they do quite a lot of it, they also go with the guys they know. I mean, if they have a camp that produces a lot of fighters for the UFC, they'll keep that camp on notice. Like, you got a new guy coming up, tell me about him. And, you see a guy coming out of Alpha Male, you see a guy coming out of AKA Jackson's, ATT, any of these camps, they start building up a little momentum. They're right there in the UFC.
And there's a trend towards a lot of the upper level fighters, or especially the guys who aren't champions and maybe aren't going to get title shots anytime soon, like Ben Henderson and guys like this who have kind of had their run and are still elite fighters, are testing free agency a little bit more. I think
Hmm.
there's some urgency on the part of the UFC because they feel that free agency market starting to build again with Bellator being resurgent and Risen maybe being a thing that they're going to have to be contending with, at least in terms of attracting fighters. That I'm hoping that we see them starting to snatch up. I'm hoping in general we start seeing these younger prospects that we've been kind of keeping our eye on starting to end up in bigger promotions and start running into higher level fighters and get a little shine.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I hope to see a lot of more of that with their upper divisions where they really need to be predatory for
Mm-hmm.
the higher weight classes. But Luke Sanders, great young fighter. Really just he's very much a in the MMA metagame fighter. Lots and lots of striking in transition. Great on the clinch, great on breaks, great when moving through takedowns and in scrambles. And otherwise good but not great in any other singular aspect. You watch him wrestle purely just on his shots and his entries, and his wrestling's not amazing. You watch him grapple with his position and his advancing and his submission attempts, and he's not an amazing grappler. He's not an
Yeah.
amazing striker. But the thing to really watch with him is that he'll drive somebody into the clinch or drive in for a takedown, and he won't get it. And the moment he doesn't get that, he's cracking an elbow or, you know, falling out of the pocket with a hook or jumping in with a knee and just doing something to make every transition moment an opportunity to land a strike. And that's the kind of stuff, especially with as tough as he is and as hard as he can fight for as long as he can fight, that could really push him a lot further than just being technically deep in one area.
Yeah, no, he's the technique. The technique is going to come hopefully, and he's got some
Yeah.
real craft to his grappling. But as you said, it's not outstanding.
Yeah.
Um, but anything he lacks, he makes up for in aggression and athleticism, and
Yeah.
that's the stage of like career development he's at,
Yep.
where when you have that kind of athleticism, you can rise higher than your skill level, just by, and we talk about this all the time, just by getting after the other fighter, pushing a pace, and making them spend so much energy trying to like defend you that they just have nothing left. And you see this all the time. And I'm trying to remember, there was like a case study in this in the UFC, and like one of the cards recently that was just like a very undercard, and there was just a fight where it was like this is like I don't remember, but it was a classic case of a better
It's like
athlete.
Michael McDonald, his fight with Masanori Kanehara, where he was losing
That
a lot of that.
Yeah, that I was thinking more of just like a superior athlete overwhelming a superior technician in the first round just by raw aggression and athleticism.
Yeah. Oh, I remember. Was it that? What's his name? The Russian guy, Magomed Mustafayev fight against Joe Proctor.
It might have been. I'll look it up in the
Anyway,
background
it
and
happens all the
I'll shout
time.
out a random fight in the middle of the show.
The only thing that's a little dangerous here is that Blanco is sort of like the classic version of that guy. He's that guy that never developed all the rest of those talents, and
Yeah.
or has Blanco is a better wrestler, I would say, and at this point maybe a better striker and a better grappler too than Sanders. He just doesn't have the same natural continual aggression. Blanco has great moments of aggression that are then combined with puzzling moments of complete inactivity or inattention.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting to see this. This is a tough fight because Blanco is a guy who can probably just physical skill or technique for technique match Sanders, and so a lot of it's going to comes down to attitude, and Sanders having a better style to win rounds.
Yeah. Yeah. And Edgar Garcia, I'm sorry, Maxime Blanco, is the kind of guy that is a good test for a young fighter. Like, how do you deal with that style of fighter? Like, because if you can't win against that style of fighter, um, with the physical tools that Luke Sanders has, he's gonna have a hard time in the UFC, or at least make it competitive. He can lose and be competitive with him, but if like Maximo Blanco is blowing you out of the water, um, then there's a question of how able are you going to be able to how able are you going to be to hang with the rest of this division? Because it's not going to
Well,
be.
he's up a division for this fight too, so that's also a
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So this is a short notice
It's
fight.
short notice. It's up a
Oh yeah.
division.
Let's look at the matchmaking implications of this. I'm an idiot.
All things considered, this should be treated like kind of a free pass for Sanders because he's facing a more experienced fighter up a division on short notice. But
Mm-hmm.
it'll be interesting to see because it is a fight that Sanders is probably going to have to try and athlete his way through and
Mm-hmm.
and just get through on aggression, and is going to be matched athletically by Blanco, but perhaps not aggression wise.
Yeah. By the way, the fight I was thinking of: Sheldon Westcott versus Edgar Garcia.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just not a fantastic fight, but Westcott, the better athlete, just totally overwhelmed Garcia with just aggression and I'm really strong and
Yeah.
having some technique. But like, yeah,
It's very true. So then, question of course is who's the next most exciting prospect on this card,
Hmm.
and it might be Augusto Tanquinho. What do you think?
I'm okay. So on a personal level, I'm really excited for Tanquinho because so he got signed on super short notice, which makes me worried. But to a certain extent, it could help him because Tanquinho is a very very high level grappler, really accomplished jiu-jitsu guy. Um, Joe Rogan is I don't know if Joe Rogan's doing this card as an announcer, but if he was, he would undoubtedly, assuredly call him world class and like elite and all that stuff. And Tanquinho is a world champion in the gi, world champion out of the gi. He's the guy who bounced Eddie Cummings from the ADCCs this year by defending every heel hook known to man. Really, really solid grappler. Still something of a raw MMA fighter.
Yep.
And his other skills are still kind of coming together. He's less terrible of a striker than I thought he would be when I went initially and watched his MMA tape. He actually throws, his strikes aren't great, but there's at least some bad intentions and some power in them.
Well, he's a good coordinated athlete. He
Mm-hmm.
it's the natural mechanics are there,
Mm-hmm.
and he's willing to be aggressive, and he's powerfully built. So like there's definitely it's one of those things where like, will the coaching get him the rest of the way? Because if not,
Yeah.
we've seen other BJJ guys like that who, or he could end up like Hector Lombard, where Lombard never really ever seemed to learn to be that technical a striker, but when
Threw really, really hard when you got close to him.
yeah.
So I mean, like I think Tanquinho is going to have some of the problems that jiu-jitsu guys have in the sense that his striking is not going to be phenomenal in this fight.
Yep.
He's not terrible, but that by no means is he a good striker. He's actually got some pretty decent finishes to his takedowns. The problem is that just covering the distance for him is the real trouble. So it's one of those things that he actually gets in. He's got some pretty decent shots. He's got some pretty decent single legs. He can pick you up on a double leg and put you down because, again, he's a really physical athlete. And if he gets you on the mat, he's pretty darn good. But I'm going to be interested to see how he responds against, the two classic tenets of like metagame MMA striking, which I'm not sure he's going to see against from Charles Rosa. But coming out of ATT, Rosa's gonna be pretty well schooled in fighting guys like Mendez. He comes out of a really strong grappling camp. Like when I think of ATT, I think of grappling first, and so this should be an interesting fight. I think Mendez in the long run could end up being an interesting fighter for the UFC. I think he could be like I think he could be ending up like of course I'm forgetting the name. Bantamweight jiu-jitsu guy who like finishes north-south chokes and
Honey, yeah.
yeah, kind of like Hani Yaya. I think he could end up being a Hani Yaya. Like I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation for him. If he really takes off, he could be kind of a bantamweight like Damian Maya, but I think that's a stretch. That's a stretch ceiling for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a similar. He's got a less lockdown. His jujitsu style, like I described, it's like somewhere right in the middle between Aoki and Maya,
Hmm.
where like because Maya for a long time has just been like, I will take you down and I will get you into mount and then I will lock you down. And if you don't make any mistakes, I'll just keep you there. And if you do, I'll finish you. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep you there.
Yeah,
Whereas Aoki is the I'm going to go straight into mount and then I'm going to beat you relentlessly to a pulp and you will give me something.
yeah,
He's sort of right in the middle. Like he definitely goes straight, he cuts straight to mount. And then he does enough with his ground and pound to force guys to work, and it'll be interesting. We just haven't seen him against enough high level guys to know if he's going to really keep up that kind of offense when he's in the UFC.
yeah. And I'm interested to see what a guy like. I mean, and Rosa's a more of a grappler. So in
Yeah,
this fight,
it could
this
tip in Mendez in Tankino's favor if Rosa decides that because Rosa is also he's a grappler at times to a fault. He's the kind of guy that he was competitive in his fight with Dennis Seaver going in, but he was also just like, I'm just going to keep grappling with this guy, even though he's got an advantage over me here.
yeah, and he kept grappling with Yair Rodriguez.
Yep.
Like, yeah, so it's one of those things that um, I feel like if Rosa had a full camp, he probably could come in with a game plan at this stage in Tanquino's career that would give Tanquino fits. Um, I'm wondering with this short of notice, does Rosa just fall back on a default skill set, and do we get a really good fight like that is to Rosa's detriment?
Yeah, it could be because if Rosa can stay is willing to stay upright, he should just be able to outwork and outbox Tanquino. Make him
Yeah.
gas, especially on short notice. And with
Mm-hmm.
the way he strikes, he would get tired and
Yeah.
then take over the fight later. But who knows? It'll be interesting to see. Now, we started out talking a little bit about Joey Gomez. Maybe that was before the show started. It might have been,
Yeah, it
but
was.
I'm actually really pretty excited to see him fight here and take this fight against Rob Font. I think this is a
Yeah,
very interesting fight for him.
I'm intrigued to see because I scouted him for the bantamweight list. And at the time that we scouted him, the tape that was available on him wasn't the most impressive. He's got some good hands. He's actually quite an adept boxer, and he can kind of sit there and throw some nice punches if you are content to kind of walk into his range. Um, and he actually seems kind of more comfortable countering guys coming forward than he does coming forward. Because when he comes forward, it kind of ends up being just like almost feeling like a dude playing a video game, like trying to come up with the flashiest, most explosive move he can throw. Um, so I think rewatching tape of Gomez, I think my take on him is he's actually more of a counter striker who is still learning the patience to stay to make people come forward because when he comes forward, it gets kind of weird sometimes.
Yeah, I mean the big thing with me is that he's a practiced enough fighter to be decent. He's not like totally raw. He's a long-time Marine and has been working with camps and training a lot as an amateur for years. One of those guys that just kind of kicked around the amateur scene for a while before
Mm-hmm.
turning pro. Um, so his takedown defense is really pretty solid, and his boxing is good, but he's just kind of got this freakish build that could make him something more special than the sum of its parts.
Yeah,
Because there's a reason that all of his wins are first round knockout, and it's that his arms are just ridiculously long and leg like, and so even when he doesn't hit that hard or if he doesn't throw that hard a punch, there's just so much torque behind his strikes on the end of them that he just absolutely drops people. I mean,
yeah, no, he's got that long, strong build that just is seems to be like the fighter build. Like
yeah,
if you wanted to, if you were making yourself a fighter, that you would seem to want that long. rangy build that just makes guys just tough to deal with. Like little
It's
short,
the Conor
stumpy dudes.
McGregor build is what
Yeah,
it is.
exactly. It's
That's
the Conor McGregor, it's the John Jones, it's the Alexander Gustafsson. It's tough to deal with.
yeah. I mean, especially being short, a short guy with long arms is like prime MMA ability. That's what we want. You want to be a good fighter, be a short guy with long arms and a short torso and long legs. And, it's the Anthony Pettis build, too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about comparing him to somebody like Anthony Pettis, that's exactly what Anthony Pettis has going on.
Yeah.
Um, Interestingly, too, here, though, he's fighting a guy who's kind of a lot like him in that respect. Rob Font is very much the same kind of build. It's just kind of more of a varied offensive fighter, more of a kickboxer, Gomez being more of a straight boxer, and a little bit more of a willing grappler and wrestler than Gomez. And so,
Yeah, I
I
think
don't know.
this is a fun matchup.
Yeah, it should be one of those fights where I expect them both to just try to take over with the striking. They both have power, and it'll probably come down to who hurts who first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otherwise, yeah, Paul Felder is on the undercard, and obviously we've seen him in the UFC a bit. He's hit a setback. He's kind of hit a wall where I think the UFC tried to over promote him because he came in as such a big, powerful, exciting fighter.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, well, obviously he's ready for the top 10 right now. Let's stick him in there against top 10, top 15 level fighters. And that's resulted in back to back losses.
Well, hey, I'll say that his fight with oh god, who was the fight in Chicago?
Edson Barboza.
Yeah, the fight with Ezra Barbosa was a ton of fun.
It was.
But yeah, no, I think it's one of those that he's gotten a little over where he needs to be at this point. I think Darren Cruikshank is a really good fight to be fun and a tough fight, but very winnable. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not.
Cruikshank has already kind of hit that wall and has seemed to have regressed rather than improved off of tough opponents.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a very good, especially because Cruikshank's a really small lightweight. He's only 5'8",
Mm-hmm.
and Felder is 5'11", and thick as a brick shithouse. So I think that, especially just on the power differential, and I would be surprised if Cruikshank won this. It's kind of, I don't know. I feel a little bad for Cruikshank. He's probably a better wrestler than Felder is, but he's basically just otherwise facing a bigger, more powerful version of himself.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be tough. Cruikshank's a tough. I mean, Cruikshank is a tough stylistic matchup for anyone who wants to strike because he's a very competent striker. He's really hard to take down. If you're not a really good wrestler and you start getting into trouble, you can't just have that like emergency valve takedown on Cruikshank. It's not going to be that easy. Um, and I think for Cruikshank, it's more the fact that he's fought some really good dudes recently, in Benel Darius and James Krause, who. The Krause fight was a bit of a different thing, but it was so quick. I'm trying to remember. I remember the James Krause fight that was like just absolutely beautiful. I think it was a foot sweep, wasn't it, or some sort of trip?
Krause hit a foot sweep on him and then just jumped on his back and choked him
Yeah,
out.
yeah, and that's like a quick submission loss. Like that's one of those. It's one of those things. Like how much data can you actually draw from that versus like Benel Dariush, like Darren Cruikshank. Benel Dariush is a better fighter than Darren Cruikshank. That's a tough matchup for him.
But I don't know. I'm just kind of like at one point I thought that Cruikshank was really improving his game nicely right around those back-to-back spinning knockouts he had of Mike Rio and Eric Koch. But since then it just kind of seems like he's becoming more and more of a fighter that wants to be well-rounded for the sake of being well-rounded.
Yeah.
And he's tried to rely more and more on his wrestling, and he's just not that great a wrestler.
Yeah. I've been trying to find the fight that actually I'm trying to remember. I don't think Joey Martinez actually throws fancy stuff. I think I was misremembering that.
Joey Gomez?
Yeah, Joey Gomez. That was just sticking in my head. Like I'm trying to remember. I think that was just me mashing together some like like Joey Gomez was one of the other like 140 bantamweights I looked
It
at.
could be. Gomez is a pretty nuts and bolts boxer. He
Yeah,
really
no,
doesn't do a lot else.
it's more of I think the Anthony Pettis comparison that I wrote down here stems more from his tendency to want to be on the outside and then explode on you from the outside, or just be on the ground and explosive movement on the ground.
I
Sorry,
can see
something
that.
just wasn't sticking right in my head, so I just kept looking at stuff for that.
All right. Otherwise, moving up the card, Chris Wade is taking on Mehdi Baghdad in a not a Baghdad's not a quite a prospect at this point, but Wade still is. It's an
Yeah,
interesting fight. One I think Wade should win, as he's been slowly building through the UFC, and he's one of those weird fighters that's like when he's a little more athletic than his opponent, he looks way more athletic than his opponent. And when he's a little less athletic than his opponent, he looks way less athletic than his opponent.
yeah, and I mean, for Wade, I'm really excited to see him get in there because I think Baghdad's just a better test for him than he's been facing recently. Uh, I mean, Cristiano Giagos, obviously. Where's Giagos' profile? Um, Tough fighter, but
Yeah, I
not
mean, I
really.
don't know. It's interesting just because Baghdad's such a kind of like Joey Gomez. He's such a singular talent. Like Baghdad doesn't wrestle, he doesn't grapple, he
Yeah,
doesn't do anything other than strike, and he's a good striker,
yeah,
but he's not. He comes from. We'll talk. I mean, we might as well talk about him because he's in this fight, and like I say, he's not quite a prospect. He's been around for a while, but he's new to the UFC. He's a very entrenched Muay Thai stylist in
yeah,
that he just wants to sit right in front of his opponent and exchange. That's what he
yeah,
wants. He doesn't want to chase you around. He doesn't want to doesn't want to have to move to defend or anything like that. He just wants to be right in front of you, trading and like dodging and slipping and coming back with combinations. And because of that, he's kind of hittable. And because of that, if you move around a lot, he has a lot of trouble tracking people down.
yeah. It's an interesting because if I'm remembering, Wade, like he is sometimes willing to stand there and exchange a little bit.
He's
Um,
kickboxed quite a bit as an amateur, and he's not a terrible kickboxer. He just doesn't have any real power in it. He's kind of, he'll throw a lot of stuff, high output, keep the fight active there, but he's not going to be like totally dominantly taking over a fight with his kickboxing.
yeah, I think it's an interesting fight, and for Wade, I'm just happy to see him progress. To like just a better quality of athlete. Giagos, I think, was a sneaky tough fight, but up until then, his what was this fight before that?
Zhang Li
Zahn.
Peng and then Kane
Yeah,
Karaza.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
it's a
again, it's one of those things. It's prospect. We bring him along slowly, but I'm always excited to see when a guy gets a step up. It's not that he shouldn't have been fighting those fights. I'm always excited to see when he gets put in front of a different challenge.
well, yeah. I mean, especially with wins over Frankie Perez and if like Chris Wade came in pretty battle tested,
Yeah,
and he's not a bad fighter. It's just like I say, it's that strange thing of like when he's a little bit more athletic than his opponent, he looks like a great athlete. But when he's a little less, he looks kind of uninspired. Like that Giagos loss or that Giagos win rather, he
yeah.
beat
Was
him, but anytime Giagos actually was willing and able to exert himself in any single burst of athletic engagement, Giagos won. And the
yeah,
problem was that Giagos couldn't actually force himself to not try to wrestle and grapple with Wade long stretches because Wade's a pretty excellent wrestler, has a pretty excellent wrestling pedigree, and so Giagos would get him down, have him on the ground, or have him up against the cage or something like that, and then like 15 seconds later, Giagos would be on his back trying to figure out what the hell just happened to him after getting swept and getting picked
yeah.
and turned over.
It's funny because Wade's coming out of Ring of Combat, it's almost looking at it. He got tougher tested in Ring of Combat than he has been. The Giagos fights being the exception, but like the first 2 fights, I mean, the guys he fought in Ring of Combat were tougher tests than than majority of his UFC stints so far. So it's one of those. I'm looking forward to seeing him get a very different style and a good athlete, and a guy who is going to try to like really force a game on Chris Wade.
So that's pretty much everything I had to cover on this UFC Boston card. I mean, a lot of good new fighters. I'm excited to see Elvis Mutapcic. He's not a prospect at this point. He's a pretty damn well-seasoned veteran who's about 9 years, getting into 8 or 9 years into his career at this point. But I'm glad to see him get a shot in the UFC.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, we want to jump in and talk about a couple of lightweights. We're starting to do an actual little bit of decent scouting on that division, which we were never able to do when we were actually producing the scouting report. And talk about a couple of guys who have who look really great regionally.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one I want to talk about, and this is actually a bit of serendipity because right after I finished watching tape on him, suddenly started hitting me up on Twitter about something else totally apart from this, and it's just sort of like out of the blue. I don't know him, but
yeah,
we're going to talk Diakise and Bekzad Abdurakhmanov was my plan.
Oh, okay. No.
Oh, okay. Should we talk? Okay, we'll switch. Never mind.
I was gonna say, like, I thought we were doing this 2 at a time, and I'm like, well, I scouted.
We are doing it 2 at a time. I picked different too. I figured you were. Okay, never mind.
Let me pull up my thing. I'm still trying to find my doc. I'm a mess today. So
you are a mess today.
So all right. So who are we talking about today?
We can talk about Tananis and Piraev if you'd prefer.
That's who I had kind of looked over for earlier this week.
Okay.
And naturally, is Tananis the guy that you didn't look at?
Yeah, I haven't looked at Tananis.
Oh no. Well, how about I give a little breakdown of Tananis and you give a little breakdown of somebody else, and then.
All right, we'll do Tananis and Diakise.
Okay, so Tananis is fighting out of Hawaii, and is, I believe, a training partner of Max Holloway. And having watched him fight, basically explains where Max Holloway's like huge uptick in defensive wrestling and defensive grappling has come from. Because Tananis is he's a really well-tracked fighter in terms of his game. He gets in on you. He takes you down with a pretty strong double leg shot. And then he gets on top of you, and he's got really excellent transitions and setups for submissions or controls to then ground and pound you. He's kind of a cut below in all of that from being elite. He'll catch submissions, but he doesn't finish them. What he tends to finish, he tends to get position on guys. And he does finish some submissions, to be clear, but like the really slick entries against good guys, he doesn't tend to finish. But when he gets you in a control position, he beats the crap out of you. And the biggest problems he has right now is his striking. He's a really low output striker. Like even pre the big uptick in volume, he doesn't throw a lot of strikes. He throws maybe like 20 strikes around on the feet, if that. Tends to just follow guys around. He wants to come forward, but he doesn't really know how to pressure, so he tends to follow guys around the cage as opposed to cutting them off or really trying to like close distance on them. He's got some decent clinch work, but he's really much more about that double leg takedown, ground control. So he's got his excellent game, and he hasn't really been forced out of it. And he's a really good athlete. So he's a guy that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. He's only 8 fights into his career. He's been fighting since 2011. So the jump to the next level might come in the next year or two.
I can't remember. He was involved in a big contract dispute too, right? Was that with one or was that with King of the Cage? I think that might have been King of the Cage.
I mean, I don't remember who it was with, but I know he's bounced between one and King of the Cage, which probably caused issues with both of them. because
It was one of those things that it was with King of the Cage. He was
yeah.
signed early to that. He claimed that his contract had been forged. That
Oh, that's right.
that he had never agreed to a long-term contract with King of the Cage,
Hmm.
and I can't remember what the eventual settlement to it ended up having to be. I think he may have had to buy his way out of it or something, but
Yeah.
it was just a huge mess that's kind of slowed him down a little. But yeah, it'll be
Well,
interesting to see as he continues to go on now that he's in one, I believe.
it to a certain extent too, it's probably going to help him because the lightweight division kind of got cleared out a little bit, at least in terms of prospects. Like a lot of them got picked up in the last year or so. So now he kind of sits as one of the clear top guys still out there now, as opposed to just being one of a larger pack. So I think when he gets picked up, he'll be more of a highly anticipated get when he gets snatched up.
Yeah. So the guy I looked at that I was most excited to talk about. I wanted to talk about the guys I'm most excited to talk about first, obviously, because I'm selfish. Was Mark Diakiese. And this was the story I was telling before I had found out that you were unprepared. Uh,
Nothing but professionalism over here.
yeah, but I had been scouting him and suddenly heard from him on Twitter just randomly about something else. I was like, holy shit! What? How serendipitous. Unfortunately, I didn't ask him what I should have asked him, which is exactly what his basic martial art is. But he looks very much like he started out in Taekwondo. I'm not sure if that's actually the case or not, but that appears to be his baseline style. Very, very excellent athlete. The interesting thing is that his style, because it's so based on like big, exciting spinning kicks and really powerful kicking game. He's prone to getting pressured off of it because you close down somebody who's doing that and they can't do it. You can't kick if somebody steps into the pocket against you. But he's coupled that up with a really aggressive wrestling game.
Hmm.
And it's not the most technical game I've seen, but he is a top flight level athlete, and so a lot of that doesn't really matter. Like you don't have to be that amazing at your technical wrestling if you're a great athlete who's willing to get in on a single or a double and turn your opponent and then power through it. Like you don't have to have that many secondary or tertiary layers to your wrestling game if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, I pulled up his Vernon O'Neill Bama 17 bout and just have it going in the background. Man, he kicks hard.
Yeah, he kicks super hard, and the thing, like, there's this great moment in his fight with. Really, this is kind of what pushed me over the edge. Watching his Jack McGann fight, there was a moment where McGann got in on a single leg on him and hoisted his leg up in the air, and Diakiese jumped off his back foot and was able to land on that same foot and force McGann to drop his leg. And the moment McGann dropped the single, Diakiese threw a duck down into a sweeping low kick off of that,
Ooh,
and it was just like
oh my
it's one of
God.
those athletic moments where it's just like, oh man, there are like 5 people in the world that can do something like that.
Yeah. I will say too, in this Bama 17 one, A+ level cage grab on his part. Could show some Nova Unio guys a thing or two about grabbing the cage.
Hey, you
Which
got to
part?
do what you got to do.
Yeah, that's So no, definitely a high level athlete, definitely a high level kicker. Um, Distance covering. This given the Vernon O'Neill fight was about a year ago now, a little over a year ago now. So he has 2 fights since then. Distance covering seems to be a bit of an issue for him. A couple times he gets into the pocket. He doesn't really seem comfortable there. he seemed to like have a couple times where he was just in the pocket and then he just like kind of fell forward and reached at the guy and tried to pull him into the clinch.
Yeah.
But
I think
yeah,
he's trying to. It seems like from what I've seen, and I don't know for sure, but it seems like the big thing he's trying to supplement his style with is more and more aggressive wrestling.
yeah,
Like if people are going to close me down, he's been training. It seems looks like, at least according to Sherdog, he's been training with All Stars some,
yeah,
and then Atherton Submission Wrestling, which is Scott Askham, Lee Chadwick, Rob Broughton,
yeah.
uh,
Ooh.
Mike Wilkinson. So some pretty decent UFC level uh, British fighters out there, and it's just sort of like a combination of really athletic striking from range and then hyper aggressive wrestling to
Yeah.
go
Well,
with it.
I pulled up his Bama 19 fight, and people like, so against Jack McGann, and one of those things you look for in a guy. I'm seeing a big improvement from one fight to another, and
Yep.
it's against a much higher level opponent because
Yep.
Jack McGann is a fairly experienced fighter, whereas Vernon O'Neill was a guy in his first pro fight and was like totally athletically outmatched. And
Yep.
he looks much better in this fight against a higher quality opponent. So that's an excellent sign.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's somebody that's really, that really is accelerating quickly. And with the kind of athletic ability he has, could do some exciting things.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Just having watched this little bit of tape, he's exciting and he's checking a lot of the boxes you hope to see when you just glance at a couple quick fights.
And the big thing is that with like the level of athlete that he obviously is,
Mm-hmm.
you just don't have to be that good at everything.
Yeah,
Like all you
yeah,
have to do is be willing to stick with it long term, and as long as you're getting good training, things are going to click. Like that was the big thing I kept saying about Rose Namajunas when
yeah,
people were really down on her after losing to Carla Esparza in her first UFC bout.
yeah,
And it was like, oh well, I just have people. A lot of people are like, I have real questions about like how quick is she going to catch on to this stuff? It doesn't seem like she's, it seems like she's just so wild everywhere and doesn't have a lot of process or anything like that. It's like when you're as good an athlete as she is, shit can just click. Like if something just changes just right for you and things start to click, it doesn't really matter how long it takes. And then when you see her the next time out against Paige Van Zant, and suddenly it's like, oh man, all of these pieces are so much more solidified.
yeah, yeah, man. And he looks like the kind of athlete that could do that because I saw that fight go, man. He's just throwing Jack McGann all over the place, just
Yeah.
slamming his face into the mat right and left. And McGann went for a wrestling switch, and Mark's response was just kind of like, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work on me.
Yeah.
Did,
So
did,
I'm
did
I'm
not do
really excited about
anything noticeable to stop it. Just like kind of sank his hips in. It was like, go ahead, try.
him. Yep.
So no, he's definitely an exciting guy, and where am I? It's I'm gonna have to take a little deeper look at him.
Other than that, looking just this week, and unfortunately, I haven't had time to scout this guy because I've been incredibly busy. But looking at this week's cards and the random fighters on it, just looking off records, there's a Brazilian CFC fight with Michelle de Cruz Lima or Panico, probably Michelle Panico, I'm guessing, and 9-1 fighter fighting this weekend. Whose only loss is to, I believe, the reasonably decent. Oh, no, it's a different guy. I was thinking a Rodrigo Almeida, but it's a Rodrigo Almeida. Like that's just one of those names in Brazil.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of those.
And then there's
It's pretty RFA.
yeah, it's a pretty RFA. When the most notable guy out of it is Benjamin Smith out of Extreme Couture, who, while he started in 2012 and has put together a decent regional record already, is also already 35. So,
Yeah, like a
if he's accelerating to the UFC, time is definitely a hard factor. And honestly, outside of that, there's really not a lot else going on
What about
regionally in
Invicta?
MMA this weekend. Hmm?
Invicta?
Oh, well, yeah, there is an Invicta event, but prospect-wise, even for that card, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Angela Hill?
Yeah, Angela Hill's fighting. It's true. I do like Angela Hill. I do think she's got quite a lot of upside. But
Yeah.
and I'm glad to see her back in Invicta because she just needed a lot. She needs a lot more seasoning than she was going to get in the UFC.
Yeah.
Otherwise, on that note, I think that covers everyone we want. Oh, did we talk about Randy Brown last week? I don't know if we
No, we
did.
didn't.
No, on Dana White's new Looking for a Fight show. I want to cover him really quickly before we get out of here. But this is the second guy signed off Dana White's Looking for a Fight. And I was able to watch quite a bit of tape on him. And I sent you some too, didn't I? Or did I?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I'm trying to let me see if I can find it because
And I got to say, the easiest comparison to make watching Randy Brown tape on Randy Brown is Michael Page.
yes, that's okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's the easy comparison to make. He's not nearly as much of a one punch knockout artist, which is sort of that's the thing that makes Michael Page really special is that on top of being a good athlete and a interesting striker, he's just got incredible one punch knockout power. Um Brown isn't quite that guy, but he's a decent kickboxer, decent boxer. He's got some reasonable technique in his hands, similar kind of swagger to him, and a much more willing grappler. Like that's, I think, the good sign is that while he's not a very good wrestler to date, that's a weakness he'll have to work on. He's
Mm-hmm.
a very good athlete and a very willing grappler, so that even when he's getting tangled even when he's having trouble stuffing some takedowns, and he doesn't have trouble stuffing everything, he's at least got some of the basics going on takedown defense. But even, if he ends up on his back or anything like that, or ends up against the cage, he's very quick to scramble, very quick to try to jump on submission positions and get to the back or throw up an arm bar, stuff like that, that um, can make him a more dangerous fighter than might otherwise be. He reminds me a little bit of Danny Roberts, who's now in the UFC and who beat Nathan Coy,
Yeah.
where like Roberts got taken down instantly in that fight. And it was like, oh God, now it's over for him. But the first thing
And
he
then,
did was throw up an armbar and triangle and got a tap. And it's like, well, shit. I mean, if you can make that work.
yeah. I think he's an exciting Randy Brown's an exciting young fighter, but I think he's got some things he needs to grow with, but that's being a young fighter, that's some
Yeah.
of the things you need to fill in. But I agree with your assessment. I think that he's got the tools in place to grow a game from there, but I think we're going to see some growing pains from him. In the same
Yeah.
way that I think we both expect growing pains from Sage Northcutt
Oh,
because
yeah.
they're
I mean,
products of this.
Sage Northcutt at one point came very close to, he if not losing, gave up a round to Cody Fister.
Yeah.
Like Northcutt, these young fighters, they are going to have problems. They're going to hit road bumps or speed bumps if all they're doing is fighting in the UFC. And seeing Northcutt about to fight Andrew Holbrook, that's an interesting fight because Holbrook is probably similarly athletically gifted, um, and an incredibly wild fighter
Yeah,
and a very good grappler.
I think for Brown, I think the big advantage for him is I don't think he's going to end up getting nearly the height that Sage Northcutt got.
Yeah.
And he's going to have time for a little bit more reasonable of a development path. I feel like Sage is likely going to get rushed ahead of his time. And then there's going to be a fight where he gets in over his head, and then the wheels are going to come off the bandwagon pretty quickly there.
Well, or I don't even know if they'll come off the bandwagon because he's so likable and willing
Yeah,
to
there'll
be
be
in the
there.
spotlight.
By the time we get there, there's going to be a crew of people who are lined up ready to jump on him once he loses.
It's true. It's true. He will, and he will. He's also the kind of guy who's probably just going to always have detractors because he's far too enthusiastic for normal conversation.
Yeah.
But Brown's an interesting fighter, and I don't think he's going to have nearly the hype. I also think he might just, I don't know. It's weird because I don't know that he's better prepared than Northcutt, but he's certainly been training out of better camps for longer.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't have the same deep technical base that Northcutt has, because Northcutt actually does have a very deep technical karate base to
Hmm.
go on, and you can see it when he fights.
Yeah.
Brown doesn't have that, but he has more general MMA training under his belt. So
Yeah.
should make for an interesting fighter. It's nice to see these guys getting scouted in the way that they probably should be, but it's also a real prospect is somebody that gets you fired, as they say. So I expect we'll see some huge busts off this Dana White show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Anyway, on that note, oh, sorry, what?
it has to happen. Like, that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, it has to happen. That is how prospects work, and Dana White seems to be scouting very much for hyper exciting potential, and those are the guys who are also, that's your Soka Jews
Yep.
are the hyper exciting athletic potential fighters. You're going to get some massive failures in there.
Yep.
On that note, it's time to close up our show. Thanks everyone for watching. You can find me on Twitter at DZaneSimon. You can find Tom on Twitter at TP_Grant. Give us a like on YouTube and subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM. That way you get all the Bloody Elbow video content, shows, interviews, analysis, all that good stuff we do. We are going to pack this week's Boston shows into the next few days. We'll be doing a Care Don't Care, and If I Did It, a vivisection. I don't know if we're going to have a vivisection for the Invictus show. That might not happen this week, but we'll have a 6th round for the Boston card and all our normal stuff. So everyone stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. And Tom, thanks for joining me. See you next time.